when the Wilmington 10 incident came about in 1971, because the whole atmosphere was so negative in terms of how the white power structure dealt with African Americans. You see, they got rid of their school, and this thing had been building up and building up. It's like a dog. If you keep beating on a dog long enough in the corner, he's gonna bite you back. So the students in 1971 got to the point where they weren't gonna take the white power structure. So they decided they were going to boycott the schools. And what happened, in my opinion, and I'm giving away my book, is that in 1971, the Wilmington 10 was quote-unquote black retaliation for what happened in 1898. They rose up. They had taken so much of this that they reached a point where they couldn't take it anymore.
Country. And all of a sudden the massacre spurs up? So this is a social element and an issue of morality that we have to address within this nation and in this country, or else history will repeat itself.
All right. So these people had to pay taxes on their property. They were out of town. They couldn't pay the taxes on their property. What happened to the property? If you don't pay taxes on your property,
the government took it away.
Exactly. So because these people owned property, they lost their property as a result of this quote-unquote race riot, right? So where did this property go? To people like the Keenans and the McCraes. The main thing I'm trying to emphasize is that these people were robbed of their property. They didn't pay the taxes because they were put on trains and run out of town. So I have created an organization, and my organization is seeking these people to be compensated. So that's what I'm about, in addition to being a writer. Any other questions? What do you think of 1898? What's your impression? Somebody says 1898, what do you think about?
Well, I think of a time where people were put under oppression, and a time when many people had things that nobody should have taken from them, and how spiteful some people can be.
Very good. He's a smart guy. He's going to go a lot of places. Anybody else? Come on, people. I'm all ears.
So you said you got an organization that's compensating people that loses their land?
Yes.
You ever compensate anybody?
We're working on it.
So, Lena, have you ever encountered any students during your time as a teacher that made you think about inequality and systematic racism?
I always think about this one kid. His name was on my roster, and during the first 10 days of school, where you're checking your roster every day, and he hadn't shown up at all. So he wasn't there for weeks. So I just didn't think he was going to show up. We had this big scary lockdown at school one day, and then the child shows up the next day. So we're in this weird mood at the school, and he shows up, and he's an African American kid, and he's wearing makeup, and he's very goth, which you just don't see a lot of African American kids who are goth. You just don't. And so when he walked into my classroom, I stopped him, and I was like, "What's your name?" He told me his name, and I said, "No, you're not in my class. What are you doing here?" And he says, "Yes, I'm in your class. It's on my schedule, all this." And I said, "Well, what's your name? Because I'm trying to figure it out." And he tells me his name again, and his last name jogs my memory. So I go back and I get my roster, and I'm like, "Are you this kid?" Because he was telling me a different first name, and he said, "Yes, but that's my dad's name. I don't use that name. Don't call me that." So I said, "Okay." And he came to my class. He would never, ever do anything. And at one point, I had asked the students to draw me a picture of a pig, and I couldn't tell you why, but he drew this beautiful picture of a police officer. And it looked great, but the whole way of thinking was just completely different. Nobody in the class did that but him. And that was the only piece of work that he actually ever did in my class. So I started to give him books because, he could read, he's at least doing that. And then he stopped showing up. So I went down to the office to try and figure out what was happening here. And they told me in the office that he was homeless. He was a street kid. He was living under a bridge. And he was a prostitute. And that's how he was supporting himself.
So they knew all of that.
They knew all of that, and I knew none of that. Which is really frustrating as a teacher, because when you know things like that, you can sort of respond to them even if you never actually talk about it. And then shortly after that, he did come back, and he had this run-in with the principal. He had his hood up, and she told him to take his hood down, and he said something smart like, "It's part of my religion." And she said something back to him like, "That's not your religion." And then he said this really rude thing which you should not put in your play. He said, "Your God can suck my God's dick." And he said it to the principal. And he got expelled for it. And I was outraged because, yeah, it's a really rude thing to say, but we don't expel kids for saying rude things. But they expelled him. And then after that, he was gone. And that was it. That was the end of the story as I know it. So when you teach kids like that, there's just not a lot that you can do. And I felt like, well, I gave him books to read, and that is all that I ever did for that kid.
Jennifer Barfield. Because I think about all the work we did with 1898 prior, and we know we did it. We're all happy, kumbaya, but then it suddenly just kind of dropped off. I wish it could be more like a ... you know, as opposed to a period at the end.
Because African Americans rose up so quickly, it shocked the power structure of the people who were in charge before the Civil War. It shocked them. They decided that they were not going to live under this kind of situation. So they decided they were going to kill as many black people as they could to set an example and run the black folks who had power out of town. In other words, they wanted to make America great again.
I would say that 1898 matters because 1898 was kept under wraps by the wealthy whites for 100 years. And with the help of white professors, white citizens, black professors, and black citizens, we banded together to make certain that November 10th, 1898 would not be forgotten.
The way that I always think about it is we have these huge societal problems. The fact that we have kids living under bridges and prostituting themselves is a societal problem. It's not a school problem, but it's going to show up in the schools. That child's test scores are going to be horrible because he's not doing anything. And why would he? And then somebody's going to say, well, this school, their test scores are horrible. And then North Carolina, oh, that's a D school, or this is a failing school. And it really doesn't have a lot to do with the school. It has to do with the society around the school.
If I had one word on what it was like to be black in America, it would be hell. Because nobody should have to constantly fight for something that they should have been born with.
I guess my point is 1898 is very crucial not only to the history of Wilmington, but to the history of America and the world. Because it set an example that if you are a non-white and you want to have the same things that white folks have, that's a no-no. You can't do that. And nothing has changed. So it's up to you folks to understand that what's happening in today's world is no different than yesterday. History is just a series of current events.
thank you everyone, and thank you for bearing with us in the cold and the elements. We really appreciate that. So we had planned to do a quick Q&A. We're still happy to do that if you'd like to join us. But we understand if you guys want to get warm. But we're going to take like a second break and then jump into a Q&A for folks that would like to join us for that. But we really appreciate it. So let's take just a breather, and then we're going to come back for a Q&A. Thank you. From that, and we're continuing to hold interviews in the community, and we'll be doing so probably throughout February, and then a full production of this play in April. Well, most of our projects are multimedia. We use lots of projections and sounds and lights, so this is an interesting difference in things that we do. This is the first outdoor thing I've ever done, so that was fun. But I'm more curious about y'all's questions, if you have any. So I'll just open it up to folks that are, oh, there's lights. I'll open it up to folks that are true believers. Are there any questions about where the work is now? Any questions from you guys? Oh, we have a question. Yes.
So my question is.
Should I give you the mic?
Yeah. I don't feel like it. How many drafts has the script gone through, and how many more do you expect it to go through before the final performance?
Amber, do you know that? I think this is probably so Amber was actually, yeah, Amber, you want to say anything? Because Amber was a part of the first workshop that we did in 2018
or 19.
It was actually 2019. Yeah,
2019.
No, it was 2018. I'm sorry.
2018.
So sorry.
But the draft has changed a lot since then. Like, Trey's interviewed some more people, and I think definitely the tone of everything has changed a lot since then.
I think this is officially draft. I mean, this one's weird because we cut a lot out for the purposes of this performance. But there are basically like 3 drafts, and I really only expect one more as we add stuff. But I don't know. I mean, once we have all of our material, all the new interviews, we will kind of see what we have and kind of lay them all out and see where they fit. It's a lot of our projects are very collaborative. Amber and others and will be a part of like the workshopping process. So it's very collaborative and organic. Thank you. That was a good question. Any other questions from the group? See this group. Did y'all have any questions you'd like to? Oh, here's one. I'm gonna trek over to you. Oh look, this has pretty good. Just kind of follows you wherever you go.
Thank you. So this has been a group effort in writing. Who is the writer? I'm sorry. Is the writer here?
So more or less me, but so it is collaborative. So it's been different like groups that I've worked with. So the first workshop session was really it was the first workshop session was with a group of 7th and 8th graders at DC Virgo, and they worked with us to do a little bit of transcribing, and they helped sort of like arrange like what goes where. They're all interviews, so they're all based off transcriptions. You look at the transcription and you find what is engaging, what's interesting, what you want to keep. You take out sort of ums and uhs and things like that, and you streamline it and move things around. And there just have been different folks. Amber, sorry to keep. So there was the group of 8th and 7th graders, and then I worked with a group of mostly college and recent college grads in the summer of 2018. Amber was a part of that group. Do you want to speak to that, like what that process was like?
Yeah, so it was like nothing like I've ever experienced before, honestly, because usually when it comes to theater, you get a script, you're ready to go, you read through it, you do a read-through, you memorize your lines, you do your character work. But with this one, it's like our first rehearsal was, hey, like, let's look at these transcriptions of these people that I interviewed. Like, this person knows about 1898, this person's a descendant, this person knows all this history. So, like, our rehearsals were partly like us transcribing like recorded interviews, and then half then going through and figuring out what like actually feels like it's going to make a statement and teach the history. And then we got into the actor stuff, but it was kind of like we're like creator, actor, back and forth. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, another question. I should just leave the mic with you.
So when retrieving this information and doing the research, have y'all found any pushback? Obviously, 1898, it's been really hidden away, and it's caused a lot of systematic issues. Have you found pushback when creating this piece, or people that are still trying to hide and destroy information about it?
That's a good question. I have not necessarily encountered pushback. I think partly just because of the folks that we've reached out to, people like Bertha Todd and Sonia, and folks that really want to talk about it. We did interview a gentleman named George Roundtree, who's a descendant of the perpetrators. So Roundtree, his great-grandfather was the lawyer that kind of like helped the coup happen, essentially. I wouldn't say pushback. He talked to us openly, but he wasn't. Other books and things have said this because he's very outspoken, but he hasn't come out and said. He'll say things like, "Oh, my great-grandfather's just a product of his time," and he's kind of famously never really apologized per se. And I think that you might hear the same thing from other descendants, perhaps. Not that I've spoken to every descendant of the folks that were organizers of the coup and massacre. So that's probably the closest, but no direct like stop doing this. I think generally folks that are aware we're doing this have been quite encouraging. Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna just start handing the mic to people. Amber says I can't do that.
No.
Any other questions, guys? Oh, okay.
Have any reparations been secured, and where is that process at, if you know?
So I'm not an expert on that. I don't think any have. Actually, we just re-interviewed Larry on Friday, and this did come up. To my knowledge, no. I don't think there's been any kind of reparations. Or the term that is preferred now is compensation, is what I've learned from Larry, because it's just less of a knee-jerk, I suppose, from people that are against reparations. So compensation is the term that folks like Larry and advocates have used. My understanding is, so what Larry told me is that the families of the descendants are a little bit more knowledgeable about what transpired now. So, think about the descendants of Alex Manley and the printing press and other folks that own land. So those folks, my understanding is many of them are in the process of perhaps searching for a lawyer. That's as much as I know, and this just comes from the conversation I had with Larry Renee Thomas on Friday. He'd be more in tune with that, but that's as much as I know. So no compensation has been secured, no.
Sorry.
Who's that?
Over here. Theo, hello.
Theo would like to speak to that.
There is actually, at UNC Wilmington, I actually have an awarded scholarship for 1898. It's in their general admissions, and it kind of just talks about, so anyone that's going to Wilmington, it just kind of, it's not really necessarily descendants or anything, but it's trying to bring awareness and kind of give back to people that were taken from. So there's none directly. I feel like it's definitely a lot more well known, which kind of goes off the pushback question from earlier. It's just anyone, any time I tell people that I'm doing something like this about 1898, most people know about it, which is very shocking to me. And especially with the fact that there's scholarships now for it and just all different types of stuff like that, I feel like it's definitely, I don't know if that would count as
no, I think
repercussion.
that's a good point. I think there's been more recognition.
Yeah.
And certainly even since I started this project in 2018, I think a lot more people know about it, about the event. It's talked about more. There's just a lot more conversation about it, acknowledgement, and I'm not sure if that scholarship existed in 2018.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's fairly new.
So I think you see more things perhaps like that. So I think people who have the power to, because I mean, in reality, I mean, reparations or compensation would need to come at a pretty large level. So I think that people who are in power to do stuff, I think things of that nature have been happening. So more acknowledgement. Any other questions or comments? Was there a part you guys found particularly engaging? You seem like you want to say something. Thank you. Lena? Sorry.
I think all the interviews with the teacher were very engaging and very relevant to Wilmington right now, especially with New Hanover High School having some Title IX allegations and a lawsuit actually against them over this, and hopefully this will shed more light on why that is happening, because I definitely think it is it's an attack on black students there and things like that. That's why it's never been taken care of. So I definitely think it's a really good perspective to be included.
Yeah, I think the conversation on neighborhood schools in particular is something that I want to dig in more to and get more in content in the play. And that's, I think there's a documentary coming out that's actually about the Wilmington school system, Montgomery County school system, with neighborhood schools kind of a big aspect of it. So yeah, the school system, I mean, it's very segregated, as I think anyone would tell you that works in the school system. Anything else that struck you as particularly engaging? Any other comments or questions? Anything from you guys? Guys, I want to thank everyone for their time. I know it's a lot to ask. We should start a fire. What do you guys think? A little bonfire? Thanks so much for coming out, guys, and for sticking around. We really appreciate it. We hope you can stay with us. We have this full production of this play will be in April. And we'll be doing another project in February dealing with the conversations on abortion access. So thank you for your time today, and have a great rest of your night. Thank you. Oh, we have a hand. So in April, it'll be at Dreams of Wilmington, 901 Fanning Street. And if you were able to get a program, I believe the address is in the program. Thank you. Great question. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming.
My name is Amber Brianna Moore. I'm an actor, model, somewhat of an advocate. I wouldn't really call myself an activist. My involvement with this play and everything, I've been involved since 2018. And I've kind of been involved with like interviewing and transcribing, stuff like that. It's important. I feel like no one in Wilmington, well, that's a stretch. There's a lot of people in Wilmington that don't want to talk about it because they're like scared of it, it makes them uncomfortable. And there's like a lot of people in town that don't want to confront history, and they're especially scared of talking about African American history and scared of people who care about it. I don't know how else to say it. Like, there's a lot of people in town, especially growing up here, growing up here and going to predominantly white schools and dealing with racism, and going to the schools with like the very same children of the descendants that did this massacre, and knowing that they do not care about it. They couldn't give a damn. So I just.
Did you learn about the 1898 in school?
Yes. So I had one teacher, and he got in trouble for teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, yo, like, what they said is they don't want black students to be uncomfortable. But what I read was we don't want to talk about it because we know a lot of the students here, their family was involved. You know what I mean?
Right. My name's Chloe Mason. I am from Wilmington for the most part. I work here in the cafe at the museum where the reading took place. I'm also an artist and an actor myself. Yeah. I thought it was very engaging and informative. Obviously, a lot of passion going into it. I definitely was struck by the pieces from the teacher's perspective, since I did go to New Hanover High School, which is a school here in Wilmington, and sort of just,
the systematic effect of 1898, it all became very clear how that is present in the school systems here in Wilmington to me, especially right now. And it sort of even made me think about, I'm seeing that areas here, it's neighborhood schools, how there's a lot of redistricting going on even right now. And I feel like what I've kind of noticed, it's in areas that are becoming more wealthier, like my neighborhood that used to go to New Hanover in Midtown, and now all of those kids in that area are going to Hoggard. It's just given me a lot to think about, and it's definitely important to, trace the roots of oppression.